Hello, everyone. All right, so you know why you're here. I got no music playing in the background, so feel free to get another playlist going on the side and enjoying some smooth tunes as we learn Source Filmmaker. Okay, so I'm going to be covering essentially everything that I do when I personally make a movie. There's definitely there's a lot of things to learn in Source Filmmaker, things that I don't even know about. So let's begin. For this, you're going to need, you should have Team Fortress 2 installed. You don't have to, but it is very, very, very nice because you get things like, like bits of wood, some doors, props, and obviously character models. So your source Filmmaker will look a little bit different. This is a secondary viewport that I use. And I'm just going to turn off notifications. So moving on, you won't have this. You can use... it'll look something like this. I highly recommend the secondary viewport. You'll see why in a little bit. And of course, this is all you're doing. You can change it however you want. Okay, so first off, we're going to need a map. It doesn't matter what you load up. You can just load up anything. And to do that, you just hit Control L. That brings up your map list. Let's do a Team Fortress map. I know Arena Nucleus. That's kind of fine. You can rearrange from the type of game or where you've downloaded it from, so all of your workshop stuff. You can also subscribe to certain games that support Source Filmmaker, like Blade Symphony, Day of Defeat. I think Half-Life's in there, some other games. Alright, so anyway, let's open up that Nucleus. You can also, if you know what you want immediately, you can type it in. I'm not that smart. And loading maps takes a little while, no matter what the map. So with the power of editing, I'll pretend my PC is incredibly powerful. Okay, wow, that was fast. Actually, I barely had to cut anything. So, this is the map. I don't even know where to begin. Just kidding. So over here, you'll see you'll have the, this little thing is what controls your cameras. What I like to do is I like to get everything loaded up, so all models, all props, all lights, everything set. So right away, we're going to head to this little icon over here, and this icon kind of makes everything. See here, camera, light, model, particle systems, and all that. Okay, so let's get to a new camera, and I have it set here so like all cameras grouped together. I think it's a setting in here. That thing's called like group selected DAGs. Moving on. So when it says that you have your work camera selected, that means this camera is not going to be used for the final product. This is sort of hey, this is a camera. Like, if you want to say, if you're working from afar and you want to work up close with a different camera, this is what the work camera is for. Now, with my secondary viewport, a lot of people will say just have it up here, kind of make it obviously a little bit nicer looking. I have it down here, so I have my my scene camera in here. We're going to click this little icon and go to change camera, camera 1. Now, you're probably going to get this error. We're going to select the camera, pretty much just saying that you're going to have to switch your mode or your type of editor in the timeline. My bad. So there's 3 main things you'll be working with. Clip editor, motion editor, and graph editor. Clip editor is sort of like if you've ever made a movie in like Windows Movie Maker, Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Avid, anything like that. This is where it kind of goes. You can, as you can see here, you can imagine, oh, this is where I split up shots when I want to change certain things. Personally, I do not do that right away. I leave it to the very end. All right. So if we want to actually edit anything, we want to go into the motion editor or the graph editor. You can also switch between the clip editor and either or, whatever you last use, using the tab key. It's pretty handy. Anyway, so okay, so now we can move it. And just like I said earlier, it's like a spectator camera, so use the WASD keys and the mouse. That's pretty funky. Yeah, you can also use the, what cheer is it? You can hold the R key and use your mouse to kind of rotate it like this. Personally, I don't use it that often, but it's kind of handy. Okay, so let me just straighten that back, just using my eye. You don't just notice here when we selected this down here was green, and then it turned orange. Now, basically that means that there's been a change, and I can undo that change by hitting the escape key, and it goes back to what it was before. Also, by using the scroll wheel, this also shows my entire workflow in the timeline, just kind of where everything is. So when I hit play, this little meter slowly goes through, and so if I want to do some really, really tight stuff, these little ribbons on the side here, whenever those are present, that's kind of like when you hit Control All on the Word document, that's everything in the timeline is selected, at least for whatever's selected in here. If you want to change that, so say if I want, camera to be looking over here, all right, so I'll hit Enter to save that change, but then at 100, I'm assuming that's milliseconds in, I want to look over here. Then I save that, and when I hit play, you'll see that it kind of changes. So that's the most basic concept I can think of. Like, that's just for a camera. This applies to models as well. So anyway, moving on from that, once I get a camera or two in, I kind of like set everything up. So I'll just build a quick little scene. Everything that you load, like a new model, it'll load up into your whatever's the selected camera. So since we only got the one, I'll set it up there, and we're gonna want to load a new model. Let's see. You can use I highly suggest a Team Fortress 2 model to work with. So let's get a scout. Okay, so our model's in, and obviously it's a little too close for comfort. So this is where we want to switch to the work camera. And as you can see, this is where our regular camera comes in. This is where we start moving everything. So if you hold Control, this is where you can see individual bones. You can click on it, and using these tools down here, my bad on remembering all of this. I'm just so used to using shortcuts. You can click the Move tool to say if you want to move it like in a general area or space. Then you get the Rotate tool, which, as it does, it rotates. This is where things look natural. Hey, look at me. I'm a girl. I'm waving. Isn't that nice? So I'm just going to hit Escape to bring that back. Whoops. Screen tool is similarly the same thing, except it does have, you can click, what was it? I think it's like the center, I can't remember what it's called, but you can get some really neat effects with this. If you want to base your movement kind of around something, obviously limbs are not ideal. I don't use it very often, but you can play with it. I'm sure there's a reason. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so obviously this shot, it's a little too close for comfort. We want to move this femme scout, so we'll click her entire name in the animation set editor, and then we're going to switch to the Move tool by this. And it's just like any other 3D program where you kind of move it along the plane. So this is looking a little bit better. Let's just bring her down a bit. So we'll get a nice rule of thirds here. Or I'll kind of center a bit. The shortcuts I was talking to earlier, the main ones I use is W and E. It says shifts down there. It might be shift. It never works for me. Shift kind of hides everything. Anyway. Okay, so that looks a lot nicer. Wow, what a model. But it is looking a little dark, so we're going to hit a new light. And You can bring it up through the little plus sign over here, or you can also right click, and it's the exact same menu. That I usually just right click, but if you have model after model after model and you run a room, you can just use up here, and we get a new light. Now, just like a model, the light will spawn right where the camera is. So that's really cool. So exact same thing. It controls just like a camera. Actually, I lied. It controls just like a model. So using this, you can rotate it, move it around, and I don't want anything complicated for this. So, it's just like if you've taken any sort of like film class or school, or just kind of know how cameras work or lighting setups work as well, you'll realize that Source Filmmaker really relates to that sort of stuff really nicely. What I mean for lighting setups, like you can use light, like I can aim this at the ground in front of her, and you can't really see, but it lights her up a tad. Um, Works better in reflective rooms. Anyway, so boom, she is lit. What you'll see over here, this little section of anything that you click on, these are I don't know the proper term, but I'm going to call them their internal settings. So for the light, we'll focus on for right now. You'll see all these funky things. The main ones we'll touch on is intensity, the horizontal and vertical field of view, and min and max distance are do as they do. You'll see what I mean by that in a second. And volumetric intensity along with colors. So intensity does obviously what you think. It changes the lighting, and usually it's always too strong. You always want to have at least 3 lights, two from the front and 1 from the back. So kind of have them weak. And I'll do a very quick lighting setup as fast as I can. Well, let's see. We'll give that front camera, we'll give it some orange. So we can adjust the colors down here. It's just your typical RGB sort of thing. So I'll make that kind of reddish orange. We'll give this light a little bit more red, and we'll add a third light into the back. And when I suggested 3 lights for the back, it's always really nice to have this kind of light. A lot of people just think they can just put 1 light just on the front, call it a day. And for the most part, that is true. You don't really need to mess with it that much. But when you go into more advanced cinematic sort of things, that's when you kind of want it. And let's see, you kind of want the backlighting just for the subject to pop out from the back a bit, see where her like shoulders and her sides kind of blend into the background. Well, then you can kind of differentiate and kind of give it some 3D space. Okay. Well, all right, so there she is. That's always fun. So let's change, let's fool around with more of these settings. So, max horizontal and vertical field of view, that kind of, let me go back here. I'll change this very bright. As it does what it sounds, kind of changes the space of what it takes. Max and minimum distance, it kind of, say if you don't want the light to, let's just say I only want it on her, like that. I could do that with my max distance, kind of like stop it before it goes any further. Or I can make it just go all the way to the end of the map, that sort of thing. Now, what I was talking about down here, volumetric intensity, this is a very common lighting thing that people love to use in Source Filmmaker. So I'm going to turn this intensity down, and I'm going to click on my light. I'm going to hit Enable Volumetrics. And in order for the setting to work, I have to like go in and out, or into a different scene and go back. And this is that like glowing light that you see in a lot of Source Filmmaker videos, and it does look very nice. So intensity still changes the brightness. Volumetric intensity heightens that thickness of the, I guess, like the fog. So there, we'll kind of do that. And I'll do this for the backlighting as well. Now you kind of see, now I got this contrasting kind of look. I'm going to fool around with this very, very quickly, just to give an idea. Okay, so that's, that looks pretty bad, but I'm not going to think about it too hard. I will after when I export this video and cry later on. Moving on though, let's actually move on to the main thing, animating the subject. So there's kind of two ways you can animate this. Actually, there's a bunch of ways. I started doing a mixture of both ways. Main way is to kind of, remember how you could select how much you want in here by using the shift key of what you want. Imagine creating a shot-by-shot stillboard. Before I move on, I almost forgot a really easy way. I didn't know for the longest time. Moving like models like this is really cool, and that is sometimes, what you want. But if there's an easier way, do it by using this, by going to Rig, and you want to do Rig Biped Simple. I think that's going to be the only one you'll have, but don't worry about all of mine. And now you'll notice that all the bones are gone, but I got something like rig hand, rig elbow, and this sort of it's a system that makes movement way more natural and hands stay in place. So, see, I got the beginning here of her bending over. I'll have her even more. And this is where you use the tools to move like this. See, this is like a natural, like, oh, her hand would move like that. Basically gives the subject life. So we'll do that again. So I'm going to make her just come up, like spring up and say hello, like just kind of wave. Okay, and you just kind of do this bit by bit. A good way is to select a bit and then edit the rest throughout. So and okay, so this is what I've got so far. It's very rough, but again, this is how I used to animate of doing it like a storyboard, and also in the what was it, the 1 or 2 minute video. This is how I would animate, and that's how I showed. This is the most basic of way of kind of getting your dick wet into animation. Not your fingers wet or your toes wet. No. I'm talking about that big wiener. Okay, and now it looks a little weird. Her face is just kind of like a zombie. And what we're gonna want to do is after when she kind of realizes where she is, we'll give her some facial animation. So just like the camera settings, we're going to click on her face, and you'll see all these sort of settings as well. They kind of subclip them as like eyes, upper face, etc., etc. So, but for now, we'll just make it simple. We'll have a nice little smile. I won't worry about too much else. And we also want her looking at the camera. And this is kind of where you control the eyes. And so she's kind of dead. She brings up. And wow, that is beautiful. I deserve an Oscar right now. Okay, no I don't. There's a lot of tinkering that we got to do. You can hold the shift and you can hold alt to kind of like squeeze everything here in the timeline. So say if something is too long or too short. So now we kind of want obviously it to look animated. While clicking on everything or just what you want. So say if you want to work just on the arms, the body, the face features, you can just select it individually. You can even go to, what was it, like the rotation position only. You want to select, for now, I'm just going to select everything. It's going to look kind of bad and robotic, but you know what, hey. These are your procedural tools. These sort of give they work just like the camera and lighting settings, and they do as they do. Just so you know, playhead, wherever your playhead is down here, if you bring all the way that up, as you can see down here, it'll kind of go to what the playhead's at, and then do that, if that makes any sense. But the main ones that we want to work with right now is smooth. We're going to bring that up, and as you can see, the animation lines smooth out, and so does the model. And if I want to smooth out the ends here because it'll be a little rough, you can hold Shift and the mouse wheel to kind of broaden that selection with a gradient. Now, see, that looks obviously not great, but a little bit better. Her arm kind of clips through, which I will quickly fix. Where's her hand? There. So there we go. Okay, so obviously the length when she brings up and comes down is way too long, so we're going to select everything and bring it all closer. And also you could do that same alt drag technique to sort of quicken animations as well. Again, I'm just showing you all the basics, and from there on out you can use them in a variety of different ways that one single tutorial cannot teach you. Okay, moving on. We're gonna just want to quickly just select the rough edges and smooth them out. You can also use the round tool, which is another fantastic tool that you can select it where, and it will give it like a pure drop. Like, how do I say it? It's the best way to describe it is like it's going from point A to point B. Smooth sort of eases it in and eases it out, and round just brings it one place to another. So that might be good for waving. Okay, so one way we'll round it. She brings it back, we'll round it back in. She waves back that way, and she waves back. We're gonna just cut these in-betweeners. Okay, so that looks okay. And we're just gonna smooth that out a bit. I'm just gonna max it just for an example. And, you know, that looks okay, considering I'm trying to teach this as fast as I can without taking up much of your valuable time, because I know you want to make some sweet source filmmaker nudes. I know we all do, but we gotta, use this time to kind of learn. So that's using only the graph tool. What I mentioned earlier, the graph editor, or sorry, we were using the motion editor. The graph editor is a little bit more complicated. I'll teach in how I use it. There's a variety of different ways. So this looks great, but it looks kind of robotic. If you want Source Filmmaker to kind of like take the wheel for a lot of the animations, you can do that. You can also import animations straight from the game, but I won't cover that right now because that's like 5 seconds of something specific. And anyway, okay, so we're gonna go into the graph editor here, and whenever you select an item, or a bone I should say, you can hit M and it'll bring up this marker. This sort of brings a new point. You'll want to do that if you've been using both. Okay, so let's just say I want her to wave, and I'll have her bring her arm back down, and she'll kind of like turn and just kind of look offward. So she's kind of like in a heroic stance, maybe. So I'll just do as I did earlier, and you notice down here in the timeline that everything will kind of move. That's good. That's showing that we have movement and life. I'm just gonna switch to the work camera here. And again, if I wanted, say, for fingers to actually place along nicely and her thumb to go, like, not clip through, I would do this procedure, but with every bone. And then since there's different key modes here as well, curve fit is kind of like smoothing in the graph editor, where it kind of does very quick in, ease, and out. It doesn't look that great, but spline makes it kind of looks very natural because I can put another marker at the end here, and you can see her hand kind of bounces in. Let me just, there we go. One more time. So that's with the spline tool here. I'll use the other arm with a curve fit. I use mainly those two. Linear is like round, and stepped is like doing this in graph editor, where it's like everything is like sudden, like bam. So moving on, I'll just use it again. I'll use the curve fit for the second hand to kind of readjust. So she brings it down. But I also want this hand to kind of go up a bit. And along with that, I want her shoulders to kind of stand out a bit more. So she starts moving there, and her elbows up there a bit. I'll make another marker. Wait, is that right? Yeah, sorry. I'll make another marker there to end the animation because it will, you'll notice with the bounciness, depending how far that is, the less it will bounce. But also it'll kind of look a little more unnatural. And again, you can edit that bounce as well. Say if you don't like that bounce, you can go into the graph editor and kind of, you know, smooth that out or round it out. So now there's still a bounce there, but it's not as strong as before. See, there we go. See, that's something more I would want, like a slow ease in. And you got all these tools here. They're definitely more advanced 3D editing techniques. Sadly, I am not that professional to use them. This is amateur hour here, so bear with me. Anyway, let's go back to her hand here. I also want to move her elbow as well because it looks a little funny. Oops. Work camera. And we're going to want to bring it back a bit. Change that back to spline. So, and I believe I have one of her spine bones rigged. So when she stops waving, it's going to start, make a new marker there and have her turn. There. So as you can see, she kind of moves before she starts turning. This is because I made a marker at the very beginning of it. That's handy, again, if you want that like that forwarding motion. Okay, so pretty decent. We'll just quickly do her head as well. There we go. Her, sorry, this is bugging me. Her eyes are funky when she waves there. I just want to fix those quickly. And I'll have them look out like a hero. Okay. So that's using the graph editor. As a like, it kind of looks a little easier when I use it, because I'm sure first time using it, it's going to seem a little difficult. But I assure you, once you get the hang of it, it is really, really nice to work with. I'm trying to think what else. Also, always remember to save your work. Control S. Source FileMaker will crash. It's not too bad, but it has, like, if you have a custom map or custom models, they'll tend to do that. Okay. Well, this looks great. But let's just say I want this beginning here the camera to be close up and kind of follow her face. And then when she turns back here, I'll go back to the wide. So I'm going to make a new camera. But I'm actually just going to copy this camera because this is already here. I'm going to paste that. Okay, so the second camera, just using this little ribbon here, I'm going to select this camera. And just like the lights, it's all the camera technicalities are here. And as you guessed it, you can animate lights, cameras, objects, particles, just like a model. So I have it down here. I'm just going to use the graph editor. It's going to follow her up. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And then I'm gonna see, that's just me going step by step, changing the settings. There's a lot of different settings you can use that's in here. I highly suggest if you're having a conversation piece, using the focal distance to focus into the subject, which you want to do like right in the middle of the head is probably best, and turn up the aperture. When you do this, when you bring it to storyboard and export it, you'll notice the background kind of goes fuzzy, and the subject will still stay in focus. It's like it's again real camera terms. That's like your focus and your aperture sort of settings. There's other shadow settings here. I will not get into that because that's kind of you kind of play with on your own. And for the most part, it's usually fine on its own, but you can play with them on your own because they kind of change the intensity and strength of the shadows. And it's kind of personal preference. I'll just set those wherever. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, I want it to be a wide here. So I'll hit the B tool, which acts as the blade. And I'm just going to select this one lone shot and switch to camera 1. Now, when I play it here, it gets up, looks at the camera, waves, and then ends there. Also, show a cool eddy trick. A lot of people copy breathing idle animations from Team Fortress 2, which is what I used to use to do as well. Sometimes it's a little much, or custom models don't allow it. I kind of just go in one of the spine bones, usually is it the chest? No, we will not use the chest, we'll use the spine. And just kind of like just big spaces of slight movement, like back and forth, back and smooth using the graph tool. I suggest adding this in very, very last, as you don't need it right away, and it'll kind of screw up with things you're doing later. You'll see she's kind of got like a very slow breathing. Let's speed that up a bit. Okay, so she kind of looks like she's breathing. Okay, I think that's it. Since that's all we're going to be doing right now, we can just delete the rest of this because we don't need that. And let's get to exporting. Now, you're going to want to set up a custom command when you want to export in 1080p. I'll put that on the screen right now. And wow, that's cool. You want to type that into your set launch options. I'll just quickly show you to do that. You want to go to Source Filmmaker, Properties, set launch options, and then type it in here. And you can also just assign it to a shortcut as well. That's what I use. But for now, we're just going to export into 720p because I'm sure my computer doesn't like it when I'm recording at, I think, 1440p right now. So we're going to go to Export Movie. Posters, or if you want to do like a still image, it will, whatever your playhead is, that's what it'll do. Movie. So I'll put this on the desktop. I'll name it as Tutorial Boners. All right. This is your standard sort of export. You can have image sequence, movie sound, if you want audio or not, what kind of file. I highly suggest installing QuickTime so you can install the nice little QuickTime sort of formats. I know you say, oh, I hate Apple and I hate QuickTime, but in post-production, it is a godsend. So I'll just leave this as it is. This is where you change your sizes. If you want just a shot, if you screwed up one single shot and you don't want to redo everything, there it is. You can do in and outs. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is your render settings. If you want to set all the cameras, on default, it's 8 and 8. 8 for depth of field and 8 for motion blur. This is how many samples it takes. So if you kind of look at the blurriness of the background there, it's not that great. If I change it to say 64, you'll see it just looks a lot nicer. This also goes along for the shadows on her face. When I pause it, when it moves, you'll see like the little bouncy black lines. That's kind of like, it's not rendering at full strength, because why would it? Because you're scrubbing. So this is 8 sample, and it looks very, there's blotches everywhere. It's So 16 looks, that looks pretty nice. 16 is very passable everywhere. 32 is kind of, 32 and 64 has been what I've been using, depending. Shadows just look nicer and nicer. If you go all the way up to 1024, it takes forever. Render times are forever. And it doesn't look there we go. It actually looks beautiful. This is maybe for a photo you'd want to use this. But for just for a movie, it takes way too long unless you got a weekend to spare. So I'll put the export setting as 32 and 8, which is actually just a regular setting. I don't really change it that much because, hey, there's not a lot of movement. Because see, her hand isn't been movement there. If I change it to say 32, the blur in it looks a lot nicer. But I lied, I'll change to 16. So when you do that, when you change in here, it also changes in the export settings here. If you kind of forgot to do it, if you want to do it to every single camera, this is where you do it. And there's some more settings over here, specific. I generally don't have to worry about these, but if you're in a production company or in a collaboration, you may need to. And you hit export. And this is kind of sort of where you see it frame by frame go up. I highly recommend exporting it in a low 720p, like 8 to 8 samples as a reference, and kind of watch this. Because it will do weird lighting things, or lighting problems, weird little movements, camera to camera. Obviously, it just kind of happens when when you're worrying about, say, animating the fingers, animating her lips, or animating eyes. There's a small detail that you might not notice of it just kind of like, just popping in and out of place. So I highly recommend doing it low settings first, kind of doing a check. Also, any sort of flickering lights with the volumetric lights on, that's fixed with the render settings. So having it at, I think, 32 at least fixes that problem. But it only happened once for me, at least. You can see it in one of the Go Nippon, but it drove me insane, and I never fixed it then. But I've encountered it later on with my Sonic video, and you don't see that problem anymore. Okay, so I exported that. Obviously, you want to do 1080p. I'm just going to close that. And if we go to the tutorial boners, there's my video. Wow, what a masterpiece. Thank you so much for looking at my horribly cluttered desktop. I hope you chose Smooth Jazz for listening to my tutorial, and I hope that kind of starts you on your way just for whatever you want to do in Source Filmmaker. It's a fun little program, and I highly encourage it to anyone with a creative mind. This has been Lieutenant Eddie. I want to say thank you for watching, and take care.